morning. My name is Jessica and I have a lot of books on my bedside table, and I also love watching book haul videos, so I thought I would combine these two interests and make a bedside book haul. Now, the books that are on my bedside table are either books that I'm reading or books that I'm hoping to read soon, or books that I'm kind of using for reference. There's only one really that is related to that, but you'll see as it goes along. I've counted and I have 10 books currently on my bedside table, so I'm just going to get started and go through them relatively quickly. This is the stack of books. I don't know if you can see that in the frame, but it is 10 books. It is a combination of novels, poetry, magazines. I've got some like self-help books, some academic books, and one knitting book. So there's not in any particular order, except they're in size order just because that's how I stacked them. So the first book that is on my bedside table is Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout, and this is a book that I have been recommended for so long, and everyone always talks about it and says that it's really good. It's about a retired school teacher living in New England, which is a place that is very interesting and important to me because I lived there for a while, and I just like reading about it and kind of feeling like I'm being back there again. It's kind of told through, I would say, what feel like short stories, and I think that is a lot of kind of how the book was created, because in the front it kind of says that a lot of the individual chapters were published as short stories. I mean, some like even 10 years before the book went out, so it's like a very clearly like a very well worked book. Yeah, I started reading this maybe like a month ago, 2 months ago, because I picked it up while I was working a shift at our local charity bookshop and just started reading it while I was working the till, and I then kind of powered through like the first 100 pages or whatever in that first week, and then just haven't really been fancying it. Like, it's a very particular vibe, so I'm really looking forward to finishing this, but it's just not what I'm feeling at the moment, so it's sitting waiting for its turn. The next book that I have on my bedside table is the Journals of Dorothy Wordsworth. Again, I picked this up on a recommendation of actually from someone that I was doing a writing workshop with, who I'll link in the description. Her name is Tonya, and I've forgotten her last name, so sorry Tonya if you're for some reason watching. And I did a workshop, it wasn't just a single workshop, it was a whole course of workshops on experimental forms, and yeah, it was amazing. She's just starting a new company, or like it's her old company, but she's starting it properly, and if you're interested in writing, I really recommend you check her out. Anyway, she was talking about how she'd read this book on a trip to the lakes recently and really enjoyed it. And also I was reading, I'm looking to see what it's called, The Secret to Superhuman Strength by Alison Bechdel, whenever that came out, like a few months ago. And she talks about Dorothy Wordsworth in that graphic novel, so stars aligned. Again, found this in the charity bookshop while I was on shift, so got it for like £2, and I just love the cover. I think it's really nice. Also, I was growing strawberries around the time that I found it, so yeah, but again, not very far in. Only kind of started it on shift and then haven't picked it up since, but really looking forward to it when I do. Also, I feel like these look really nice together. There's a nice white, naturalistic, kind of lighthousey plant vibe. So these two are kind of, you know, and sometimes books are just like paired in your mind. These are paired for me. and I will pick them up when the time is right. The next book that is on my bedside table is actually not a book, it is a magazine, and it is called Ache Magazine. And this book slash this magazine, this journal item, this book of pages was something that I saw in a vlog that Jen Campbell did about trying new literary magazines. And it's all kind of writing about chronic illness and disability, and it just, I mean, it's gorgeous. Look at that page. Whew. Pink on pink, lush. And look at that. Lovely, really nice. This is volume 3, issue 3. And I think they've got the 2 earlier issues, and then they also have another book that's like newer than this one, that's like a collection more than a magazine. Yeah, and I've mostly just kind of flipped through this since I got it. I read the first article. Yeah, I read the first article, which kind of talks about chronic illness and pain in relation to the like depiction of endometriosis in Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, which was just really well written and interesting and gave me a lot to think about. I think this is something that I want to just like dip in and out of, because each piece is so like concentrated and there's just a lot to digest with it. So I'm enjoying like reading a few things. Oh, I've just flipped something about Graczyn? About the Lake District, which relates to this one. So they're all linking through. They're like connecting to each other through the pages by being stacked on my bedside table for so bloody long. Yeah, would recommend a different literary journal to your average. Big fan. Big fan. Next book on my bedside table is Prairie Fires by Caroline Fraser, which is about the life of Laura Ingalls Wilder, who wrote the Little House on the Prairie book series, which I've actually never read, even though it's definitely the sort of thing that I would have been interested in as a child. But I did watch the TV show as a child and loved it, just loved it. Obviously the TV show Little House on the Prairie kind of depicts this very like romantic perception of how things were, and this kind of goes into more details on the hardships of the people who were moving west, but also of the hardships of the kind of native people that, I mean, hardship seems like even not strong enough of a word, but they're just like the atrocities that were done to the people who were living on the native lands that the colonizers were seeking to live on. And it goes into kind of some detail in that in the beginning, which I really appreciated and enjoyed. And then it does also go on to kind of talk about how the like farming methods that they used in the plains kind of just weren't suited to that sort of land, and then resulted in prairie fires and drought and all sorts of kind of natural disasters, not just for America but also like for the whole kind of globe. And I just, yeah, finding it really, really interesting. I'm about this far of the way through, about 200 pages, and it's like 600 pages. It's quite a long one, but I'm really enjoying it and looking forward to continuing. It kind of reminds me of, I read Tove Jansson's letters last summer, and again, like that was something that was, I think, about 600 pages, and I just read as I was like thinking, as I felt like it, but picked up and put down and picked up and put down, and like she came with me through my summer and through all my other reading, and so yeah, Laura Ingalls is coming with me this summer. The next book on my bedside table is a book where I have questions about the title, but I am enjoying it. But it's called Quit Like a Woman by, by Holly Whitaker. This is a proof copy, but the book came out in January, so it's available for if anyone's interested. This, again, I found while I was doing a shift at the charity bookshop, and I have stopped drinking over lockdown. I stopped drinking like in September of last year. And I've not been that interested in like reading literature around that topic particularly. I think for me it wasn't a huge decision. It was just a kind of, I was like, oh, maybe I'll not drink for a week, maybe I'll not drink for 2 weeks, maybe I'll not drink for 3 weeks, and then I just haven't picked it back up again. But I kept being drawn back to this as I was like sorting the shelves and started reading it at the till. I promise I do serve customers, but there's a lot of free time, or not a lot of free time, a lot of moments, quiet moments where you can read a little bit on the job, and then took it home to continue reading. And I have found it really interesting, but there's a lot about how the concept of alcoholism was something that was kind of created and why it was created. And, you know, she doesn't at all argue that alcohol is not addictive. She's very on the side that alcohol is addictive. But she talks about how we kind of create this binary of like alcoholics and non-alcoholics, and that, you know, drinking is okay as long as you don't cross this particular line. And I found that very interesting. And she also talks about the creation of Alcoholics Anonymous and how it was like mainly created for people who benefit most from the patriarchy that we live in, and how people who do not benefit from that patriarchy do not benefit from the structures of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the ways in which they talk about alcohol and about letting go of alcohol. So I found this very interesting to read, just something around the topic of alcohol as I'm like thinking about it a bit in my own life. I don't know if I would completely recommend the whole. I think if you're interested in it, you'd find it interesting. I'm not like, this is the best book ever, but it is different and I have enjoyed reading it so far. But it's not on the top of my list to finish right now. The next book is another proof copy, and this is a book that isn't actually out yet. I think it's out in September, and it is Paul by Daisy Lafarge. And this one almost didn't make it into the thing because I almost finished it this morning. But I've not finished it yet. I'm like saving myself for the end because I'm really enjoying it. And I ripped through this book over the past like 3 days. This book is about a young student who volunteers at a kind of like eco farm in France, and while she's there meets a man called Paul, who she feels very drawn to and also equally repulsed by, although she seems less aware of the fact that she's repulsed by him, but her body is definitely quite repulsed by him at times. And it just kind of talks about her relationship with him and her going through, the motions of kind of coming to terms with another relationship that she's had with a different kind of toxic older man, also while encountering this toxic older man and her travels around France and her, you know, crossing roads with him. And it was a bit of a slow burn. I feel like the first bit I just spent being really annoyed at Paul and just really hating him and being like, why are you falling for this guy? He is terrible. But then as it went on, I felt more empathy towards the protagonist, who's called Francis, and now feel more on Francis's side and interested to see what happens, and like really hoping. I think that's why I'm like haven't finished it yet, because there's only like 20 pages left to go, and I don't see how she's gonna like get out of the grips of Paul, and I'm like, please get out of the grips of Paul. So we'll see how that ends up, but yeah, this one probably won't be on my bedside for much longer. But yeah, I'm not sure quite when this comes out. I think September. I'll put it down below. I'll find out the real information. The next book on my pile by my bedside is the first one that I haven't actually started yet, and it's called The Making of a Poem, a Norton anthology of poetic forms and it's edited by Mark Strand and Eavan Boland, Eavan Boland, who I think are both poets themselves, and this is a book that I am kind of putting on my bedside table as like, you should read this, so you should have a look, because I do feel like poetic forms and identifying them and working with them is something that is missing kind of both from my like teaching practice, which is yet to begin, but it isn't something that I would feel confident teaching on. And also in my like writing practice, I very much like write free verse poetry and prose poetry, and other than that don't really engage with kind of historical form. But this is a book for readers who have always felt that an understanding of form would enhance their appreciation of poetry. And that's how I feel, and this is a book I would like to read. The next book is called You Are Your Own by Jamie Lee Finch. And this is a book about a woman who grew up in the evangelical church and is kind of coming to terms with the effects of that and the ways that has impacted on her internal life, and particularly about kind of the embodiment of that experience and how that has affected her. This is a book that I got after seeing, I think, a video on the channel God is Grey, where the author was interviewed, and I'm hoping to read soon. It's quite a little book. I think I had thought that it would be bigger because it was quite expensive, but I just think it's like, she's American and it's like not, I don't think, printed often on this side of the Atlantic, and therefore is slightly more expensive. But yes, I'm looking forward to reading that book. In contrast to, well, not in contrast to, but in conversation with my next book, which is Wayward, a memoir of spiritual warfare and sexual purity by Alice Graczyn. Wayward, a memoir of spiritual warfare and sexual purity by Alice Graczyn. And this I bought at the same time and is on a very similar topic, and is chunky. It is a big book. It's 350 pages, which I think this one is like less than 100 pages. So this one I started first. I'm like most of the way through. I'm really enjoying it. It's very well written. There's a lot of information in there, both personal and kind of like about the wider history of the evangelical church, or like the specific kind of parts of the evangelical church that the author was involved in. And I think at the end there's a bit more about kind of how she is now, but this one is more about the experiences that she went through. Alice was part of a family that felt kind of called to give up all of their worldly belongings and move around the country, essentially kind of at the mercy of strangers, and were very much like sold out for God type of vibes. And she found that really hard as a child, and as an adult is just kind of revisiting those stories and coming to terms with what happened, and her own relationship to spirituality and her body and her family and her history, which is something that I find very interesting and I'm enjoying reading. And this, again, I think is one that is probably like towards the top of my list for finishing. I picked it up like a month ago maybe, and read a lot straight away and then put it down. And I would like to finish this, I think, soon. So yes, that's on the list. The final book on my bedside table is Ready, Set, Raglan by Pom Pom. Mostly they do a knitting magazine called Pom Pom, but they also have other books that are just collections of patterns, and this is one of them. And I've seen it around a lot since it came out. Really like the patterns in it, was kind of looking for an excuse to buy it, and recently decided to make a sweater with some old yarn that I had. Picked one of the patterns in this book so that I could buy it. And yeah, if you're a knitter, I'd really recommend it. It's very clear, very thorough, the pictures are beautiful, the sweaters are so nice. It's got a lot of information that I would imagine would be useful if you were wanting to kind of construct your own designs or just make something work with kind of what you had. It also has a really wide size range, and also the sizes are done in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, instead of in small, medium, large, extra large, which I really appreciate. I just think is good. It's just a much better way to do sizing, especially when you're making your own garments. It just seems like we don't need those labels. But yeah, this is a good one, and this is not one that I'm reading front to back, obviously. I'm just, at the moment, am knitting one of the sweaters from this book, so I'm keeping it by my bedside so that I can refer to it as and when is needed. That's the last book. I hope you've enjoyed looking at the books that I have on my bedside. If you are in any way inclined to also make a video about the books on your bedside and do a bedside book haul, do let me know. That would be really cool. I'd be really interested to see what books are on your bedside, or on your virtual bedside, or on your metaphorical bedside. Essentially, a currently reading and a TBR smushed together. I'd be very interested. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and hope you all have a lovely day. Bye!